Our next storyteller is a complete nut. Yes, she's a nut. We love her. She's told some amazing stories. She's been on the Moth podcast. She paddles outrigger canoes, ladies and gentlemen. She's a Renaissance woman. Her life has included jobs on Wall Street, broadcasting, hot yoga teacher, 911 dispatch call center, and finally, saving the best for last, high school librarian. Please welcome to the stage, Tracy Crossier. Oh, there she is.
Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight. When I was 8 and in second grade, I was diagnosed with epilepsy, and the doctors were really flummoxed because there wasn't any reason for this sudden onset of grand mal convulsions. And I was at Sunday school, and it occurred to me that I knew the reason. It was because God was mad at me. Because how else could you possibly explain this horrible, horrible affliction? So I went up to my Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Rex, and I said, "Why is God mad at me?" And she looked very sweet and said, No, God loves all of his children. He's not mad at you. And I thought to myself, but that rotten kid that punches everyone does have seizures. So there's some inequity there. But I was 8 and I didn't have the words for that. And then, as though I'm trapped in a Gothic novel, things take a turn for the worse when I'm 10, and we go to a neurologist who informs me and my parents that due to my intractable seizures that were very hard to control at that point, that in terms of the future, I would not be able to work, drive a car, get married, or have a child. And he said this really very matter-of-factly. And I went back to Mrs. Rex because I felt that I had some data to share with her, which was clearly God was mad about something if you're going to make me barren before I've even had my first kiss. And she kneels down, so we're eye to eye, and she says, No, child. This is all part of God's plan for you. As though this was a great answer. Well, it wasn't a great answer. However, I stayed mad at God, as one does, and his PR minion, Mrs. Rex, for years. I decided that I would just lean into my child-free life. Most people did not know that I was a barren 10-year-old in a grown woman's body. So I did all of the things you do when you don't have a kid. I had this great job on Wall Street, so I can check off that box. And I worked crazy long hours. I had a weekly house cleaner for my tiny studio apartment in New York. And I spent way too much money on shoes because I was living the child-free life. But against all odds, I actually, needle in a haystack, found a man that did not want to have children. And so I thought, you take that, Dr. 1974. I have a job and I have a husband. Oh, and I can drive a car, just not very well. So life is going along. I do have maybe a little bit of anger about my lot in life and this ongoing God curse. But I keep it stored in this little thin carafe on my left rib cage, about an inch from my heart. It's always there. It always stayed sealed shut, except, oddly, on New Year's Eve. When I was married to my first husband, we had a tradition where we would go and celebrate New Year's Eve with friends in Connecticut, and they, sisters, Fran and Susie, and they both had children. And I loved kids. I'd been a nanny in college, and I loved their kids. And I was well known. I could put any baby to sleep, really. It wasn't that hard. I talked about monetary policy and Alan Greenspan and how mortgage rates would impact supplies to kindergarten. And everybody fell asleep with that. It was so easy. So sometime after midnight, when the champagne was flowing and we would go outside, Susie would go out on the porch to smoke a cigarette, and she would say to me, "You would be such a good mom." And I would usually shake my head, and she would be like, "No, my kids ask for a play date with you this week. They love you." And I'm like, "You forget that I've been barren since 10, so thank you." And she would rub my back or hug me, and she would say, "Don't give up. There's so many ways to be a mom. Just don't give up." And at that point, the cork of my sadness carafe would pop off, and I would weep, and I would weep, and I would weep. And then part of the New Year's Eve tradition is that we would then pour weeping me into the car, and my first husband would drive me all the way home, and I would cry all the way home, and we would sit in the driveway until I could stop crying, and then we would just get out of the car as though nothing had ever happened. But I knew I was sad on some level, and in the first quarter of 2001, I told my husband that I was going to divorce him. I'd had this awesome job, and I could support myself. And then in the second quarter of 2001, my amazing financial host job vanished and fell through my fingers like sand in the middle of the dot-bomb financial collapse. And I spent that whole summer applying for jobs, stomping to interviews, and I was convinced in June, July, and August of 2001 that absolutely, positively nothing worse could happen. But then, as they say, God has a sense of humor, and September 11th happened, right in the middle of me not having a job and not having a husband. I had a lot of friends that survived through weird happenstance. This one guy, Larry, got really drunk and his alarm clock didn't work, and so he did not die that day. And then another friend, Ken, realized that he forgot something for his conference, and he turned around and walked away as the first plane hit the Trade Center. And so I started to think about, like, maybe God isn't this like casual Friday Santa, this one guy pointing at you and smiting you, but maybe it's more like puzzle pieces coming together. And maybe there's like this symphony of this universe where everybody's trying to put things in the right place. And with no job prospects and no husband, I, for the first time in my life, allowed myself to drift a little bit like dandelion fluff. And I came out to Seattle, and I fell in love with it. And I decided that I would make it my new home for really no reason except that it's so pretty. And I was dragged to a singles party for the mature 40-plus crowd, which I really was like, can't I trade down? No, and I got to fall in love again. I got to marry again, which was just amazing. And then we thought, let's try and see if we could do in vitro. We barely had enough money for one, but I thought, why not, right? Why not? I'd always really wanted kids, to be honest. And so I was in my 40s, and so the doctor said, "Hey, listen, the best chance of you growing a full child is if you do donor eggs." So I don't know if anybody here has been egg shopping, but let me tell you, it's a very strange kind of meta experience to shop for what you think you want in your potential future child that you may or may not grow. And I was really obsessed with, I wanted them to look like me for a reason that I couldn't explain. I think I didn't want somebody to see me with a mismatched kid and think, oh, there's that defective barren girl from 1974. But there's like no rhyme nor reason to how life works out, right? And so I spent probably 6 months on these websites searching, and then my darling husband, my second and final husband, said to me very casually one night, sipping tea, why don't you look for a creative egg donor? What? Well, if you found someone that looked like you and then you gave birth to an engineer, you'd lose your mind. And then I said, oh, wait, come here. And I dragged him into my office and I said, I have to show you this. So my first week of egg shopping, I saw this profile of this woman named Lena. And I swear it sparkled and it glowed. And like if it was a movie, there would have been like a wink. I mean, it was amazing. And I just tabled her because there was no reason. She was tall, she was thin, she had long dark hair, glacier blue eyes. There was no reason. But she was a photographer and a jewelry maker. And she was very creative. And so I approached the egg broker, because, they have those. I mean, why not, right? And so the egg broker said, here's what you do. Write her a little note card, and just tell her a couple of things, couple of paragraphs should do the trick. And this way we'll see if she is interested. And so my note card was 6 pages, because I had to start at the beginning and say, maybe some people are infertile for a couple of years, but those are fools, because I have been barren since 1974. I have wanted this for so long. By the way, do you know it's very difficult to be a barren 11-year-old or a barren 12-year-old? And I told her the whole story. And then I threw in pictures of James and I eloping in Hawaii. And then we got this cute kitten. So I put a cute kitten picture in for good measure. And then also I have my super favorite chocolate banana protein smoothie mix recipe that I had to share with her, because that was my heart laid bare. That was my heart laid bare. And you know what? She said yes. She said yes. I know. I felt like I had won lotto. We took her eggs and his sperm and put them in a petri dish, and we installed 2 embryos. And at week 6, there's that weird swooshy, oceany sound of not 1 but 2 heartbeats. And the doctor looks at me and says, don't tell anyone just yet. And also, there's a 50% chance that you'll lose at least 1 in the next 4 weeks. And I looked at him and I thought, have we met? I'm happy to say he was wildly wrong. 8 months later, I gave birth to these big, delicious twin girls at the age of 44. I know. Thank you. They're so cool. They're too cool to be here tonight, in case you're wondering. I don't even know if they look with me. I mean, they sort of have my smile, I think. They don't even look like each other at all. But I can tell you, I have imprinted on their soul. And that's really what matters, right? And I can look back now at all of these moving pieces that had to fall into place for any of this to happen. And what I can tell you is second chances are always on the menu. They are always, always, always on the menu. I'm living proof of that. I do think the universe, you need to be precise with the universe. You need to give the universe very specific coordinates to exactly what it is that you want. Now, before I totally end, I will tell you the happy PS to all of this is that, like most in vitro people, we had 2 leftover embryos that were what I called in the Snowflake Hotel for several years. And we decided to share our Snowflake Hotel children with this lovely couple in Texas that had been infertile for 10 years. And so by the miracle of God, Ganesh, Universe, and Federal Express, we shipped the embryos to that nice lady in Texas, and then she gave birth to a baby girl after 10 years of also being an infertile person. It's amazing. So just remember, second chances are always on the universe, but do know you have to lay your heart bare, and you have to trust that the universe will provide you with what you need.
Wow. Holy cow. That story went everywhere. I love that.